All right, well, hello again to everyone who is watching and following along with this video and the Youth Sports Mental Health and Wellness Alliance. As always, I am Will Driscoll, the Executive Director here at the Virginia Sports Hall of Fame. And the Hall, in partnership with the Children's Hospital of the King's Daughters and countless other stakeholders in youth and collegiate athletics, are continuing to push the conversation forward on mental health and wellness in sports. In 2023, we will use our hashtag Sports Mental Health Monday social media campaign to provide content on topics associated with sports and mental health in youth and intercollegiate athletics. Today, helping us push this conversation forward is Matheau Dupe Hall, a former professional soccer player who is now focused on using sports to support mental health and wellness for youth athletes. So Dupe, thanks so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you so much, Will, for having me. I appreciate it. And thanks to you for all the listeners and everybody that's paying attention to mental health that's going on throughout sports. And I can't thank you guys enough. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's definitely a topic of conversation, and it's exciting to be a part of that conversation. But as we get started, you're a former professional athlete. You played in MLS, you played in other professional soccer leagues here in the States, but you know the physical requirements it takes to become an elite athlete. What drew you to understanding the mental side of the game?
In all honesty, it was a discipline. Because as an athlete, you have to be so disciplined in what you eat, what you do on and off the field, the mental toughness you have to go through these tough, grueling practices, to push your teammates, to push yourself through day in, day out, minute in, minute out through these sessions, and then say, okay, I got to do it all over again come tomorrow. So it was always on the discipline side of it to be able to keep those habits and continue them, not just for like maybe a day, but for years in order just to be considered in the 1%. And then once you hit the 1%, it's like, well, what do I have to do to be out the next, 18 guys on this roster or the next 100 players in the league that I have to be better than around the world so that I can continue to keep this going. And that was always a big thing to me, which is about the discipline, the mental aspect of it.
When you hear the term mental health, what does that mean to you? How would you define that?
It's when I first heard the term mental health, I didn't know what to think. Because it wasn't something that you heard of or that was talked about, and it's a recent topic. But when I hear it now, for me, it's like getting to know yourself, getting to know how far you can push yourself, know your boundaries, breaking your fears, your own mental fears, because sometimes as an athlete, you're pushing yourself, but then sometimes we have a wall that we hit, and it's how we get through that wall and find ourselves inside that moment. Because sometimes we'll go all day long. We'll sacrifice for the team. We'll sacrifice, so much for the sport and not realize what we need to do for ourselves in order to continue our lives outside of the sport. And that sometimes is a very interesting dynamic that I've come to realize and learn to appreciate just by going through my own mental health.
That you mentioned kind of the focus on oneself, and in team sports, it's all about the team. Coaches, administrators, people are always putting the team has to be a top priority, and rightfully so. But how does it help an individual athlete and even a coach improve everything that they do when they start to prioritize themselves as well and be able to complement their own mental health and wellness with the overall wellness of the team?
Well, it's funny. I had a coach always tell me there is an I in team, because if I don't work harder and if I don't improve, I'm not helping the team. And so I always looked at it in that way, where if I'm a coach, the better I am as a coach when communicating with my players, into understanding the players of my players and how I decide to go about pushing them, because not every player is the same. There are some players that you can talk to a certain way. There's some that you can't. There's some that you can groom a certain way. And there's different ways of handling people. So I, as a coach, I am as a player or an athlete, have to understand how to go about dealing with everyone differently. And the better you become with yourself and how to communicate and how to work on the mental side of that, you become a better athlete. When people mention the LeBron James in comparison to Michael Jordan, yeah, people feared Michael Jordan, but people love LeBron James. LeBron figured out how to make his teammates better by working with them. That's why he's not considered such a selfish player. As in the same conversation we hear about Michael Jordan, his teammates feared him because he did so much on his own. Like, he pushed him in a different mental way. And that's the side of like where you can see the comparison and how people deal with their own mental health and growing within their team and within the coaching staff.
How have you seen the conversation evolve since you've been in sports? You've been in sports your whole life. So, and you said it's much different now than it was when you were playing, but give us a couple flashpoints of how you've seen it evolve over time regarding mental health and wellness.
Well, the best example that I can give you is, I mean, I can use youth sports, for example. I remember playing, and the only team that got a trophy was the winning team.
Mhm.
In today's sports, everyone gets a trophy. So that psychologically sometimes puts kids in youth sports into a different ballgame, because it was always about competing. It was about trying to become the best team or the best player. And in today's, society, it's like, okay, we all worked hard, we all get achieve a trophy, we all get a common goal. And sometimes it makes people comfortable. And in that comparison, compared to back then, it was like the elites always pushed on. Like, you always wanted to strive to be better no matter what, which was that push. Now you don't push the athlete as much. Sometimes you have to take a step back and say, okay, well, this is where you are, and it's okay for that. I don't need to push you anymore. Like, you can stop playing, or you can stop, for this reason. If you don't feel like you can go any harder, that's fine. Where back in the day, I would say in the early 90s, it was never just stop. Like, you never had a wall. You just had to keep going. Your teammates wouldn't respect you if you said, oh, I need to take a mental day for myself. It just didn't hear that. And in today's, sporting world, you can hear an athlete say, I need to take a mental break for myself. Like, I need to take a time away because it's so much going on in my world or my life, or things that are going on. And it's good to hear it, but it's also such a change from hearing that's from youth sports going into the professional ranking. And it's a different dynamic even socially when you hear an athlete say, yeah, man, I'm exhausted. I'm mentally exhausted. In comparison to what athletes went through back in that time, it's like, well, if they had mental health days back then, sports would be a lot different now.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that we've really enjoyed doing as we've been doing this campaign this year and having conversations like this is really highlighting the work that's already being done. We know that there's a ton that still needs to be done, and we're barely scratching the surface as of right now in 2023. But talk us through your role with your organization, Play Your Position. How does that support all of the things that we've talked about and we'll continue to talk about as we go through a few more questions? But just talk about how Play Your Position starts to offer that support and create those positive experiences for kids.
Well, what Play Your Position does is it creates in a community and an environment for kids to be able to communicate and also build their confidence. For kids who have never played a sport such as soccer before, it allows them to become socially active, and physically active. And they're understanding that they can push their limits, push themselves, a lot better. In basketball, everyone plays that. In football, everyone plays that. So it's just two sports. But when you throw soccer in the conversation, you're now using your hands and your feet. You're also working with more people around you, with 11 different players on your team or 5 different players on your team. And then you're having to communicate a lot more. Some sports you really don't have to talk. But in soccer, you're constantly talking, you're constantly moving, and there's a pace to the game. And it allows the kids to, grow within themselves and wanted to be eager to learn a new sport, challenge themselves on a daily day with day-to-day goals. And along with the communication and building their confidence, because, kids today through COVID, they didn't get a chance to communicate as much. A lot of them spent times indoors, along with the fact that they have iPads every day. So they don't have to talk, and with soccer, it allows them to express themselves and learn to communicate with different people who might speak different languages, and understand that this game travels around the world. So even if you live in, Norfolk, you're communicating the same way with the kid that's from, Spain or from Mexico or from El Salvador, and the game is still the same. And you get that same love and that same appreciation from working with people around you within your own community, and continue to be able to play outside with no restriction, So it allows for a lot of great self-development and self-awareness on the mental side, where kids are learning to, grow and be able to communicate and be themselves.
You mentioned one of the barriers that I think kids, especially youth athletes today, are facing is the communication. And I don't want to say lack of communication, but maybe lack of understanding the benefits of communication. What are some of the other challenges that you're seeing with youth athletes that you're trying to use Play Your Position to help improve and enhance?
Well, one of the things that I use Play Your Position to help enhance is self-confidence. A lot of kids today don't compete. They'd much rather watch someone else compete than do it themselves. And they'll second guess themselves. And one of the things that we do is we groom confidence early. So instead of saying I can't doesn't even exist at all. So you cannot even say the word I can't do anything. I can't do this. You have to do it. You have to try it. And once they try it and they succeed, they're beyond happy. So now they're pushing themselves even more. And even if they don't get to that goal, they still gave the effort of breaking their own fear and that mental fear. So now they're no longer afraid to try it because they see their peers doing it and also pushing them on and encouraging them. And so now that weight is lifted off of their shoulders. A lot of times kids today have so much pressure on them of trying to fit in or trying to, be accepted. And this breaks that barrier because they're all working together at the same level. And there is no, oh, well, I can't do this, because that word doesn't exist. You just have to try. And once they try and give that effort, it blows them away that they're capable of doing something that they've never tried before. And now that excitement for the sport, but also the excitement of seeing their peers that they see every day that they might not have ever spoken to, they're not having a conversation. And so that confidence is the biggest thing that we do every day to make sure that these kids understand that.
We obviously at the Hall of Fame and through this alliance, we champion the benefits of sports participation. And that answer right there really kind of hit home for a lot of things. It's because kids have to continue playing, not just watch people play. You want them to play, but part of playing is also coping with loss, with slumps, injury recovery, criticism from coaches. How do you use your role and how do you use your experience to help kids with coping strategies and understand that you can move past these barriers or these challenges that you will face?
Well, a lot of it is, having face-to-face conversation. During a lot of obstacles, and I can't even say kids, but just people in general, they don't talk about it. And so I have open discussions with them. And in the open discussion, you tend to understand, okay, well, if you get hurt, this is how you can recover about it. Like, don't look at it as a bad thing. Look at it as a growth lesson. Like, okay, you take this injury, you come back better, you work even harder now. You study your craft a little bit more. You understand the game a little bit more. You understand certain things about your body now, like how to recover. You're going to take criticism where not every player or every person on your team is going to be at the same level. So you got to learn how to encourage your teammate or encourage yourself. Like, all right, I had a bad shot. The next one is mine. The next one is mine. Like, and I always reference, different sports. If you're a striker, in soccer, you take a bunch of shots. You miss, so what? You scored, glory goes to you. So keep shooting. You see shooters shoot. You look at basketball, you see a Steph Curry, he shoots the ball, he misses. It's fine, but the next one he makes, crowd goes wild. So you keep giving that effort and you keep trying because in failure, there's still success. With success, there comes growth. And those are the things that I look at when I have these conversations with kids and with even adults. It's, even if you lose, you're still succeeding because look at how far you came. You started at one point and look where you are now. Mm-hmm. And when you find success, look at how much further you have to go now if you want to be at a higher level. Because sometimes we get comfortable, sometimes we get complacent. But if you want to be elite, keep striving and then bring those along the way with you. It's not just about yourself, but can you bring your team with you? Can you push that next man that you see is working just as hard? Can you give him the confidence to rise to the occasion with you? And the more people we all bring together, the better we are as a community and the better our environment grows and our ecos grows. Because now we're all building each other up rather than leaving each other behind and saying, well, you don't want to do this, but it's more so encouraging so that we all can get there together.
Yeah, the positivity within the environment will trickle down to the players and create those experiences. We term this the Youth Sports Mental Health and Wellness Alliance, and obviously we want to provide that support and resource to the athletes. But there's another side to that coin, and that's the coaches as well. The coaches play a vital role in creating this positivity and making sure that everything is moving in the right direction. What are some of the challenges coaches are facing today from a mental health and wellness standpoint in the youth sports ecosystem?
Well, I think a lot of coaches are trying to figure out how to have these conversations. I think the tough part is that a lot of coaches come from that early background of hard work and blue collar work. Like you don't stop, you don't quit, you don't give up on your team. But they're figuring out how to translate that era into today's athlete. And, realizing that if you don't win, it's okay. Sometimes you got to focus on the player development side rather than the result side. And sometimes it's a tug, it's a give and take, because some parents will understand it and some won't. And a lot of times you have to understand how to have that conversation with the parent and how to have the conversation with the athlete. And that's where a lot of coaches today are having that mental struggle, because they're understanding how good a kid can be without pushing him too much, but letting his natural talent grow, and pushing the kid that doesn't necessarily have the athleticism, but has the mental side. So it's a lot of give and take that coaches are going through, along with the communication just in general, because you can't talk to every player the same. And that's one of the things that, you're starting to see it more and more now in youth sports, because youth sports has now become it's a meal ticket. It's a multi-million-dollar business. You look at AAU basketball, you look at Pop Warner football has changed. You look at youth soccer. There's no sport right now that's not a pipeline for kids to be exposed to social media and millions of dollars. Like, you're pretty much as a senior in high school trying to figure out if you're going to go sign an NIL deal, if you're good enough, or if you're going to be one of the guys on your team to get like a local sponsorship. Mm-hmm. Because that's really where the game is going. And if you're in high school and you're selling out stadiums, why are you not receiving money for that now? Because it's going back to the school system. So these are the conversations that coaches are having to have. And it's starting at the youth sport level. Literally at U10 is when it's a business. It's no longer a sport anymore.
So obviously there's a lot more pressure on the coaches in the room now. How important is it for them to maintain their own mental health and wellness as they approach their role as the coach? Because if a coach is having a rough day, that's going to then filter down to their players. So how important is it for the coaches in the room to maintain their own mental health?
It's very important, because coaching is the framework for everything. Good coaches are so hard to find. And when you do see the good ones, they're usually the most patient, and they're very knowledgeable within the sport, and they take their time. They understand how to separate work and outside life from coaching, just as if they were a player. And that's the true test of finding the good coach, is how they handle those tough pressure moments, but also having those conversations with the parents along with the players. Because every parent's going to think, yeah, my kid's going to the NBA, and my kid's going to the NFL, and my kid's going to play pro. And you're like, well, look, your kid's 10 years old. Let's take our time here and develop that. I know what you see, but it takes more time and effort. He might be the best 10-year-old now, but that's not the end goal. It's having to be the best 16-year-old, the best 17-year-old. Because at 10 years old, a lot of parents, or 11, from 10 to 14, every parent thinks their kid's going to go pro in something. But it's the reality of saying, well, look, they're not going to get paid at this age. So let's focus on the development. Let's focus on grooming them. Let's focus on making sure that they're well aware that their strength is there. And as a coach, it's so hard sometimes to have that conversation, because not every parent wants to hear that. And you have to be able to understand and just say, okay, you know what? I will meet you where you are. And I appreciate you, and I appreciate your child. And this is what we're going to do to make things happen.
You mentioned just the overall qualities of a good coach. And we know what those qualities are. We see them, and sometimes we forget them as people who coach youth sports themselves, myself, yourself included. It does take us reminders sometimes is what we need to maintain that for our own purposes. But you mentioned the word development. We just got a couple questions left, but we mentioned the word development. One of the things that we're going to focus on with the social media campaign later this year is self-care for athletes, and how taking care of yourself physically will help improve your mental health and wellness. As a former professional athlete, what was your routine in the off season? Because while sports never stops, we know that. We are at a period right now in between high school seasons where you might get a little bit of a break. What would you recommend to the rising junior, the rising senior, to help get their mind right, get their body right when you do have a 4 to 6 week break?
I can give you the routine literally right now. I would wake up first thing in the morning. I would eat no breakfast. I would go for a 2-mile run. After my 2-mile run, then I would eat breakfast. I would stretch for about a good 35, 45 minutes. After that, I would do my first session for an hour and 35 minutes. After that first session, I'd go back home again, shower, stretch, eat another lunch. After lunch, it'd be another weight program. So I go to the gym. I'd be in the gym for 45 minutes to an hour. After that, eat another lunch, then go for another 2-mile run. After that 2-mile run, sit down and take an hour of just conversation to myself, just thoughts, positive reinforcement, and speaking great things upon myself. That what's in my future, and I would write it all down. Write down exactly what my goals are, what my accomplishments are for the week, for the month, for 2 months in advance, and then my year-end goal. Then after that, another session for an hour. After that session, have a great dinner, stretch again, and then hang out with everybody, hang out with my friends for a little bit and get right back into it again for the next day.
And what would that routine do for you?
It kept me fit. It definitely kept me focused, and it was just discipline and drive. When you're recognized as a good player or a player in any sport, you have to be focused and dialed in. And the biggest thing you don't want to lose is fitness, because it's the hardest thing to get back. You go 2 weeks of picking out on food, you got to go another 3 weeks of working out hard. You become too social, you get a little lazy sometimes. And by working out that often and keeping yourself disciplined, your focus is so much sharper, and you then start to really progress a lot faster. And that keeps you, especially if you're a junior or senior in high school, that's going to set you above the rest. So the player that might have been good your sophomore year, you may have surpassed if they weren't working. You might be getting that opportunity now because you're so much more focused and the game has become a lot more easier to you. And a lot of times we lose sight of that because we think, oh yeah, well, I'm good, I don't have to work as hard. But the player that's working hard, that might not have the most talent but has more discipline, those are the players that continue to advance. And the player with the talent now thinks that he can always fall back to that. And at times, hard work beats talent any day of the week. And you got to want to work hard in the off season, because that's when everyone gets better. And that's where, in soccer, I used to always say to myself, while I'm sleeping, somebody else is working, because it's played all around the world. So I have no advantage. I had to be working twice as hard compared to somebody else in another country. And that was always the mentality, was to keep going and stay focused.
Well, we appreciate all of the insight you've provided, and we're going to get you out of here on this. We're going to bring it back and wrap up with the mental health side of things. But in your mind, what can the entire sports ecosystem do collectively to continue to improve mental health and wellness for the athletes that it's supposed to serve?
Communication. I think communication is the biggest thing, is being able to actually talk to your team, talk to your players, talk to your athletes, have one-on-one conversations with them, get to know who they are, not just on an athletic level, also personally, because sometimes they need that outlet. And that will help clear a lot of blurred lines for the athlete as well as for the coach. That, to me, I think across any sport, the more clear your communication is and the conversation that you have with your athletes, it will propel them into becoming a better person, but also a better athlete. Because a lot of times they don't have that person they can go to, and a coach can be that. And that conversation can then relieve a lot of pressure for them while they're playing that sport. Because that could sometimes be their only outlet that they have, because everything else for them could be a battle. And to have that conversation will definitely allow that athlete to, not succumb to peer pressure, but to be above it, and to also help those around them that might need that they can recognize within their own community.
Well, we appreciate that insight, and obviously communicating like this is just one small step in helping to make a difference. And I want to thank you for taking the time today to share your perspective and helping us as we keep that conversation going forward on sports mental health and wellness. So Dupe, thanks so much for the time today.
Thank you so much. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you all for listening.
So this conversation is featured as part of our #Sports Mental Health Monday campaign. Throughout 2023, we'll be sharing content and information featuring our alliance partners like Dupe and Play Your Position. Weekly posts can be found on the Hall's social media pages: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube, as well as on our website, vasportshof.com. Be on the lookout for more #Sports Mental Health Monday throughout 2023. And thanks again for following along.